I discovered exactly how petty an HOA president could be when I woke up one Tuesday morning in January to find my work van blocked in by a silver Mercedes SUV, parked horizontally across my driveway in our Scottsdale, Arizona subdivision. My name is Logan Matthews, and I run a small HVAC repair business that I started 3 years ago after working for someone else for nearly a decade. The van in question was my lifeline, a white Ford Transit with my company logo on the side reading Matthews Climate Control in blue letters. I had 5 appointments scheduled that day, starting at 8 in the morning, and it was already 7:15. I stood there in my work boots and navy blue uniform shirt, coffee mug in hand, staring at the Mercedes blocking my exit. The vehicle belonged to Patricia Henderson, the HOA president of our Sunset Ridge community, a woman in her late 40s who had made it her personal mission to enforce every single rule in our homeowners association guidelines with religious fervor. She had shoulder-length blonde hair that she kept in that specific soccer mom style, always wore expensive athleisure wear despite never actually exercising, and had a voice that could cut through steel when she was upset about something. I pulled out my phone and called her number, which I unfortunately had saved from previous HOA interactions. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Patricia, your car is blocking my driveway. I need to get to work." "Good morning to you too, Logan," she said in that condescending tone she always used. I parked there deliberately. "Your commercial vehicle violates Section 12.4 of our HOA guidelines. No commercial vehicles are permitted to be parked in driveways overnight or visible from the street." I felt my jaw clench. "Patricia, I have been parking my van in my driveway for 3 years. Nobody has ever said anything about it." "Well, I am saying something about it now. The rules clearly state that commercial vehicles are prohibited. That includes your repair van with advertising on it. You need to park it elsewhere or face daily fines of $100. Where exactly am I supposed to park it? I live here. I work from here." "That sounds like a personal problem, not an HOA problem." "Now, I will move my vehicle once you agree in writing that you will not park that van in your driveway again. Otherwise, I am well within my rights to block it as you are in violation of community standards." I could not believe what I was hearing. "You cannot just block someone's driveway. That is illegal." "Actually, I am blocking my own property. The driveway approaches are technically HOA common property according to the bylaws. Read Section 3.7 if you do not believe me. I will email you the relevant documentation. Have a good day, Logan." She hung up. I stood there fuming, looking at my watch. 7:20 now. My first client was an elderly woman whose heating system had gone out, and January mornings in Scottsdale could still drop into the 40s. I called my client and explained I would be late, then called a towing company. They told me it would be at least 2 hours before they could send someone out, and even then, if Patricia was correct about the property designation, they might not be able to help. Next, I called the Scottsdale Police non-emergency line. An officer arrived 40 minutes later, a patient-looking man named Officer Rodriguez, who listened to my explanation and then went to knock on Patricia's door. I watched from my own front porch as she answered, already dressed impeccably in cream-colored yoga pants and a designer jacket. They talked for about 10 minutes. I could not hear the conversation, but I saw Patricia gesturing animatedly, and at one point she disappeared inside, returning with a thick binder that I recognized as the HOA governing documents. Officer Rodriguez flipped through it, and I felt my stomach sink. Eventually, he walked back over to me. "Mr. Matthews, I am sorry, but this is a civil matter. According to the HOA bylaws she showed me, there is some language about the property designation that makes this complicated. You will need to resolve this through the HOA board or possibly with a lawyer. I cannot force her to move her vehicle, so she can just hold my van hostage. I did not say that. I am saying I cannot personally resolve this situation. You might want to contact an attorney who specializes in HOA law. In the meantime, is there someone who can give you a ride to your appointments? There was not. My wife Emma worked as a nurse at the Mayo Clinic and had already left for her shift at 6 in the morning. I ended up calling an Uber, arriving at my first appointment nearly 2 hours late. The elderly client was understanding but cold in her house, and I worked as fast as I could to get her system running again. The rest of my day cascaded into chaos, with me running late to every appointment and having to use rideshare services that ate into my profit margins. By the time I got home that evening at 7, Patricia's Mercedes was gone from my driveway. However, there was a formal letter in my mailbox from the HOA, detailing the violation and informing me that I had 72 hours to comply or face daily fines. The letter also mentioned that I would need to appear before the HOA board at their next meeting in 2 weeks to discuss the matter. Emma got home around 8, exhausted from her 12-hour shift. She found me sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by printed HOA documents I had been reading for the past hour. "That woman is insane," I told her, explaining the day's events. "The rule about commercial vehicles is meant for construction equipment or big trucks, not a standard work van." Emma, who had her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and still wore her scrubs, sat down heavily across from me. "Can she actually enforce this? According to these bylaws, maybe. The language is vague enough that she can interpret it however she wants. And as HOA president, she has a lot of power to make our lives difficult. What are you going to do? I have no idea. I cannot afford to rent a separate parking space or storage unit for the van, and even if I could, it would be incredibly inconvenient. I need to load and unload equipment, respond to emergency calls. This is deliberately targeting my business." Emma reached across and squeezed my hand. "We will figure it out. Maybe you can talk to the other board members. Get them to see reason." I appreciated her optimism, but doubted it would work. Patricia had surrounded herself with board members who either agreed with her or were too intimidated to disagree. Still, I had to try something. The next morning, I parked my van on the street in front of my house instead of the driveway. Within 3 hours, there was another notice on my windshield, this time citing that commercial vehicles could not be parked on community streets for more than 2 hours. I was starting to understand that Patricia had no intention of letting this go. Over the next few days, I tried parking in various locations around the neighborhood, each time receiving new citations. I reached out to other board members via email, but received only one response from a man named Tom Jacobs who said he would look into it, but sounded non-committal. I consulted with an HOA attorney who told me that fighting this could cost thousands of dollars in legal fees with no guarantee of success, and that the vague language in the bylaws might actually support Patricia's interpretation. I was trapped, and Patricia knew it. Then, exactly 1 week after this nightmare started, I received an emergency service call that would change everything. The address looked familiar when it popped up on my phone, and when I cross-referenced it with the neighborhood directory, I confirmed what I suspected. The service call was from 2847 Desert Willow Drive, Patricia Henderson's address. The request noted that her heating system was making strange noises and not producing adequate heat. She had called my company directly, probably not realizing that Matthews Climate Control was my business. My receptionist, Deanne, who worked part-time from her home handling calls and scheduling, had simply added it to my calendar like any other job. I sat in my van, which I had been parking at a strip mall 2 miles away and driving back and forth each day, and stared at the service request. Every professional instinct told me I should either decline the job or handle it exactly like any other call. But another part of me, the part that had spent a week being harassed and losing income because of this woman's petty tyranny, saw an opportunity. I called Deanne. "Hey, the Henderson appointment this afternoon. Did she specifically request me or just any HVAC technician?" She just called the main number. Seemed pretty urgent actually. "Why?" "No reason. I will handle it." I showed up at Patricia's house at exactly the scheduled time of 2 in the afternoon. She answered the door and her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, and then barely concealed annoyance. "You are Matthews Climate Control." "That would be me." "You called about a heating issue." She looked like she wanted to slam the door in my face, but the temperature inside her house was probably in the low 60s, uncomfortable for someone used to keeping their thermostat at 72. I could see her breath slightly when she spoke. "Fine, come in." "But this does not change anything about the HOA violations." "Would not dream of it," I said, keeping my voice professionally neutral. I followed her inside to where the heating unit was located in a utility closet off the hallway. It was a high-end system, probably cost $15,000 to install, and when I listened to it run, I immediately identified the problem. The blower motor bearing was failing, causing the rattling noise and reduced airflow. It was not an emergency situation, but it would become one within a few weeks if left unaddressed. The thing about failing blower motors is that there are degrees of failure. Right now, Patricia's system was still mostly functional, probably running at about 60% capacity. Uncomfortable but livable. However, if that bearing completely seized, which could happen gradually or suddenly, the motor would burn out and need to be completely replaced. And in January, even in Scottsdale, a complete heating failure was a serious problem. I could fix it today. I had the parts in my van. It would take about 3 hours of work and cost her around $1,200 for parts and labor, or I could do something else. "So what is the problem?" Patricia asked, hovering near the doorway. I straightened up, putting on my most professional expression. "Your blower motor bearing is wearing out. I can hear it in the rattling sound. The system is still running but not efficiently. Can you fix it today?" Here was the moment. The ethical choice, the right choice, would be to say yes and do my job properly. But I thought about the past week, about missing work, about the stress and the ridiculous citations, and the smug look on her face every time she saw me struggling to figure out parking. Unfortunately, I do not have the right parts with me for this particular model. It is a specialty component. I will need to order it. This was a lie. I had the parts. Patricia frowned. "How long will that take?" These high-end systems use proprietary parts. Could be a week, maybe 2, depending on the supplier. In the meantime, the system should keep running. It will just be less efficient. 2 weeks? Can you get it expedited? I can try, but there are no guarantees. These manufacturers are really backed up this time of year. Another lie. I could have the work done by dinner time. Patricia looked frustrated but nodded. "Fine. Order the parts and let me know when they come in." "How much will this cost?" I gave her an estimate, added a service call fee, and left. As I walked back to my van, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and guilt. I was not normally the kind of person who played games or sought revenge. But Patricia had pushed me into a corner, had deliberately tried to destroy my livelihood over a petty interpretation of a rule that nobody else cared about. Over the next 3 days, the weather in Scottsdale took an unusual turn. A cold front moved through Arizona, dropping nighttime temperatures into the 30s and daytime highs only reaching the mid-50s. For desert dwellers used to mild winters, it was genuinely cold. And Patricia's heating system, running at reduced capacity with a failing blower motor bearing, struggled to keep up. She called my office twice. Both times, Diane told her that the parts were still on order. The second time, Patricia demanded to speak to me directly, and I had Diane transfer the call. "Logan, my house is freezing. Is there anything you can do to make the system work better while we wait for the parts?" "Not really. The bearing is worn down, so the motor cannot run at full capacity. You could try using space heaters to supplement, but be careful not to overload your electrical circuits. This is unacceptable. I pay for premium service and I expect better than this. I understand your frustration, Mrs. Henderson. Unfortunately, sometimes these high-end systems have proprietary parts that are difficult to source quickly. I will call the supplier again and see if I can expedite the order." Of course, I did not call any supplier. Instead, I went about my regular work, feeling the weight of what I was doing but justifying it to myself with each new HOA citation I received. Patricia was still sending me violations every single day, now totaling over $700 in fines that she claimed I owed. Emma was less comfortable with my plan when I explained it to her one evening. "Logan, I understand you are angry, and God knows I think Patricia is being ridiculous about the van, but deliberately leaving her heating system broken feels wrong. What if something happens? What if the pipes freeze?" "It does not get cold enough in Scottsdale for pipes to freeze," I countered. "And her system is not broken, just inefficient. She is uncomfortable, not in danger." "It is still deceptive. You are lying to a client. She is not really my client, is she? She is the person actively trying to destroy my business because she has nothing better to do with her time." Emma gave me a long look. "Just be careful. I know you are frustrated, but do not let this turn you into someone you are not." Her words stuck with me, but not enough to change my course of action. Maybe that made me petty too, but I was past caring. On day 6 of Patricia's heating issues, during another particularly cold evening, I received a text message from Tom Jacobs, the board member who had said he would look into my situation. It read, "Logan, can we talk? I think there might be a way to resolve this van situation." I called him immediately. Tom explained that he had been reviewing the HOA bylaws more carefully and believed that Patricia was overreaching in her interpretation. Several other homeowners had commercial vehicles, including a plumber 2 streets over and a real estate agent who had her company logo on her SUV. Patricia had never gone after them. "I think she is targeting you specifically," Tom said, "and I do not think it is right. I am going to call for a special board meeting to address this. Can you be available tomorrow evening?" "Absolutely." The special board meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a nice facility with a large meeting room that felt absurdly formal for the 7 people present. Besides myself, there was Patricia, Tom, and 2 other board members, Sandra Wu and Gary Peterson. A handful of curious neighbors also showed up, probably alerted by the drama. Patricia sat at the head of the table looking irritated that this meeting was even happening. She wore a burgundy blazer and had her hair styled perfectly despite supposedly being cold in her house for nearly a week now. Tom started the meeting by outlining his concerns about the selective enforcement of the commercial vehicle policy. He brought up the plumber and the real estate agent as examples. Patricia immediately interrupted. "Those are completely different situations. The plumber's truck is usually in his garage, and the real estate agent's logo is small and tasteful." Logan's van is a large, clearly commercial vehicle that sits in his driveway all day and night. It sits there because that is where I live and work, I responded. I am not running a storefront or operating a business that brings traffic to the neighborhood. I am a single technician who drives to client locations. The van is no different than any other work vehicle. Sandra Wu, a soft-spoken woman in her 60s, cleared her throat. I have to say, I drive past Logan's house regularly, and I have never found the van objectionable. It is clean, professional-looking, and not an eyesore. The rules do not say anything about eyesores, Patricia snapped. They say no commercial vehicles. The language is clear. Actually, the language is not that clear, Tom interjected, sliding a copy of the bylaws across the table. Section 12.4 says overtly commercial vehicles are prohibited. That term is not defined anywhere in the document. I would argue that a standard cargo van, even with a logo, does not qualify as overtly commercial. An 18-wheeler would be overtly commercial. A cement mixer would be overtly commercial. A work van is a gray area. Gary Peterson, who had been silent until now, nodded. I agree with Tom. I think we have been too aggressive on this. Logan is a homeowner in good standing. He pays his dues on time, maintains his property well, and has never caused any problems. This feels like harassment. Patricia's face flushed red. Harassment. I am enforcing the rules that we all agreed to when we bought property here. If we start making exceptions for one person, where does it end? Next thing you know, people will be parking boats and RVs in their driveways. We are not talking about boats and RVs, Tom said firmly. We are talking about a single work vehicle for a legitimate business. I move that we officially interpret Section 12.4 as not applying to standard work vans and similar vehicles, and that we dismiss all pending fines against Logan Matthews. I second that motion, Sandra said immediately. Patricia looked furious. This is absurd. You cannot just rewrite the rules because you feel bad for someone. We are not rewriting anything. We are clarifying an ambiguous term which is within our authority as the board. All in favor? Tom, Sandra, and Gary all raised their hands. Patricia did not, glaring at each of them in turn. The motion passes 3-1, Tom announced. Logan, you are free to park your van in your driveway. All fines are dismissed. Patricia, you will need to provide him with written confirmation of this by tomorrow. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Thank you. I really appreciate you all taking the time to look at this fairly. Patricia gathered her papers with jerky, angry movements. This is not over. I will be consulting with the HOA attorney about whether this vote was procedurally sound. You do that, Tom said, sounding tired. Meeting adjourned. As people filed out, Patricia made a point of walking past me without making eye contact. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Then I remembered the past week of hell she had put me through, and the feeling vanished. I drove home, parked my van in my driveway for the first time in over a week, and went inside feeling lighter than I had in days. Emma was thrilled when I told her the news, and we celebrated with takeout from our favorite Mexican restaurant. But that night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone rang. It was Patricia. Logan, I need you to come fix my heating system. Tonight, it has stopped working completely. I looked at the clock. It was 10:30. What happened? I do not know what happened. It just stopped blowing air entirely. The house is getting very cold. This was what I had been waiting for, in a way. The blower motor bearing had finally seized completely, just as I knew it would. Now the system would not run at all until it was repaired or replaced. I can come by first thing in the morning, I said. Morning? Logan, it is going to drop to 38 degrees tonight. I cannot wait until morning. Patricia, it is late and I have been working all day. Emergency after-hours service calls carry a premium fee of double my normal rate, plus a $200 call-out charge. If you want me to come tonight, that is what it will cost. There was a long silence. You are gouging me. No, I am charging standard emergency rates. You can call any other HVAC company in Scottsdale and they will tell you the same thing. Or you can wait until morning and pay normal rates. Fine, come in the morning, but I expect you here by 7 at the latest. She hung up without saying goodbye. Emma had been listening from the bedroom doorway. You are really going to make her wait? She can survive one cold night. She has blankets and warm clothes. It is not like it is Minnesota in February. You are being petty. Maybe. But I think she needs to understand that actions have consequences. She tried to ruin my business over a parking space. Now she gets to be uncomfortable for one night while waiting for the repair person she tried to destroy. Emma shook her head but did not argue further. I showed up at Patricia's house at 7 in the morning sharp, coffee in hand and fully rested. She answered the door in a thick bathrobe with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, looking exhausted and miserable. The temperature inside her house had dropped to 54 degrees according to the thermostat. "Thank God you are here," she said. And for the first time since I had known her, Patricia Henderson actually sounded vulnerable rather than imperious. I got to work on the heating system, and as I suspected, the blower motor bearing had completely seized. The motor had overheated trying to run and had burned out some of the wiring as well. It was going to be a bigger repair than if she had let me fix the bearing issue when I first identified it. "So what is the damage?" Patricia asked, hovering nearby with her blanket cape. "The blower motor is destroyed. The bearing seized and caused the motor to overheat. I also need to replace some wiring harnesses that got damaged. Parts and labor, you are looking at around $3,000. Her eyes widened. "3,000? You said 1,200 before." That was to fix the bearing before it failed completely. Now the entire motor assembly needs to be replaced, which is much more expensive. If you had let me repair it when I first came out, this would not have happened. "But you said the parts were on order. You said it would take 2 weeks. I met her eyes steadily. "I did say that, and during those 2 weeks, you continued to send me HOA violation notices and threaten my business. Funny how that worked out." Understanding dawned on her face. "You had the parts all along. You deliberately left my heating system broken." "I did not break anything. I accurately diagnosed a problem and told you it would need repair. What happened after that was just mechanical failure, the kind that happens when worn components are not replaced in time." "You are admitting to sabotage. I could sue you for this." "Sabotage would mean I actively damaged your system. I did not touch anything except to diagnose it. If you want to sue me for not fixing something quickly enough, go ahead. But you will need to prove that the delay caused the failure, and any expert will tell you that a worn bearing can fail at any time. Plus, you will have to explain to a judge why you were harassing me with bogus HOA violations, while simultaneously expecting premium service from my company." Patricia stared at me, her face cycling through rage, helplessness, and finally something that might have been resignation. "Just fix it, please. I will need payment up front, $3,000. That is outrageous. That is the cost of the repair. You can pay me and have heat by this afternoon, or you can get quotes from other companies. But I am betting they will tell you the same thing and probably cannot get to it until next week. January is busy season for HVAC companies." She disappeared into another room and returned with a checkbook, writing out the amount with angry, sharp strokes. "Here, and I want a detailed receipt showing exactly what you did." "Of course." I spent the next 4 hours replacing the blower motor assembly and the damaged wiring. It was actually only about $2,500 worth of work, but I added a $500 surcharge that I mentally categorized as a pain and suffering fee. By noon, her heating system was running perfectly again, pumping warm air throughout the house. Patricia inspected the work without speaking to me, then signed the completion paperwork I provided. As I was packing up my tools, she finally broke the silence. "I know what you did. You deliberately waited for my system to fail completely to teach me a lesson. I did my job according to the circumstances. If you felt the wait time was unacceptable, you could have hired another company. Nobody else I called could come out for days. You knew that. Lucky for you that I was available today then." She followed me to the front door. "Why did you do this? Was it really worth being this vindictive over a parking dispute?" I turned to face her fully. "Patricia, you tried to destroy my livelihood because you did not like looking at my work van. You blocked me from doing my job, cost me income, and caused me enormous stress over something that literally does not affect you at all. You have this whole subdivision terrified of you because you wield HOA rules like a weapon against anyone who does not do exactly what you want. So yes, I wanted you to understand what it feels like to be powerless and at someone else's mercy. Maybe now you will think twice before going after people for petty reasons. This is my neighborhood. I am responsible for maintaining standards. No, you are on a power trip. There is a difference. Good leadership means knowing when to enforce rules and when to show flexibility and common sense. You do not have that balance." I left before she could respond, loading my tools into my van that was parked right there in my driveway where it belonged. For about 3 days, everything was quiet. I went about my work. Patricia presumably went about her business, and the subdivision returned to its normal rhythm. Then I got a call from Tom Jacobs. "Logan, I wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia is trying to call another board meeting to reverse our decision about your van. She is also making some serious accusations about your repair work at her house." My stomach tightened. "What kind of accusations?" "She is claiming you deliberately sabotaged her heating system and then overcharged her for repairs. She wants the board to revoke your right to park in your driveway and is threatening to file a complaint with the state contractors licensing board. She cannot prove any of that. Maybe not, but she can make your life difficult trying. I think she is looking for revenge for being overruled by the board. Just be prepared." The board meeting was scheduled for the following week, and this time Patricia had done her homework. When I arrived at the clubhouse, she had printed materials, timelines, and even a statement from another HVAC technician she had paid to inspect her system after I repaired it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patricia began, standing at the front of the room like a prosecutor, "I am here tonight to present evidence that Logan Matthews engaged in unethical business practices, deliberately allowed my heating system to fail, and overcharged me for repairs. Furthermore, his combative and unprofessional attitude demonstrates exactly why we have rules about commercial vehicles in residential areas." She went through her timeline, showing when I first came to her house, when I claimed to have ordered parts, and when the system finally failed. "He had the parts all along," she declared. "He admitted it to me. He let my heating system break down completely as revenge for my enforcement of HOA rules. This is someone who abuses his position as a service provider to punish people he disagrees with." Tom looked at me. "Logan, do you want to respond to these accusations?" I stood up, keeping my voice calm. "Patricia called my company for service. I diagnosed a failing blower motor bearing and provided an estimate for repair. The timeline for parts was based on my professional judgment about when the repair should be completed. Unfortunately, the bearing failed completely before I could complete the repair, necessitating more extensive work. This is not unusual in HVAC repair. Components do not fail on a predictable schedule. But you admitted you had the parts, Patricia interjected. I said I had parts, not that I had the specific parts needed for every possible repair scenario. Blower motor bearings and complete blower motor assemblies are different components requiring different repair approaches. This was semantic dancing, and everyone in the room probably knew it. But it was also technically defensible. Sandra Wu spoke up. Patricia, do you have evidence that Logan deliberately damaged your system? The statement from this other technician just says that the repair was done correctly, not that Logan caused the initial failure. The evidence is in the timeline. Any reasonable person can see that he dragged out the repair to make me suffer. Or, I countered, the evidence shows that a worn component failed, which is exactly what worn components do. You are upset because you had to pay more than you wanted for an emergency repair, and you are trying to use this board to retaliate against me for winning the parking dispute. Gary Peterson leaned back in his chair. This feels like a personal conflict between two homeowners, not an HOA matter. Patricia, if you believe Logan acted unethically in his business dealings, that is a complaint for the contractor's licensing board or a civil lawsuit, not something we should be adjudicating. He lives in this community. His behavior reflects on all of us. His personal business disputes do not fall under HOA purview, Tom said firmly. And we already voted on the parking issue. Unless you have new information specifically related to HOA rules, I do not see any reason to revisit that decision. Patricia looked around the room, realizing she was losing support. Fine. But I am filing a formal complaint with the state board. They will investigate whether he violated professional standards. That is your right, I said. And when they investigate, they will find that I provided accurate diagnosis, completed repairs properly, and charged fair market rates. You might not like me personally, Patricia, but I did not break any laws or professional standards. The meeting ended without any action taken against me. Patricia left immediately, not speaking to anyone. As the room cleared out, Tom pulled me aside. You really twist the knife with her heating system. I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I could have fixed it faster, but I chose not to. Was it worth it? Ask me again after the licensing board investigation is done. But honestly, a little bit, yes. She needed to know what it feels like. Tom shook his head with a slight smile. Just be careful, man. Patricia is persistent when she feels wronged. This probably is not over. He was right. 2 weeks later, I received a formal notice from the Arizona Registrar of Contractors that a complaint had been filed against my license. The complaint alleged that I had engaged in unprofessional conduct, provided false information to a client about parts availability, and charged excessive fees for repairs. I immediately contacted a lawyer who specialized in contractor licensing issues. Her name was Rachel Foster, a sharp woman in her 50s who had defended dozens of contractors against licensing complaints. The good news is that these allegations are hard to prove, Rachel told me during our first consultation. You diagnosed a problem, provided an estimate, and completed the repair work competently. The complainant would need to show that you deliberately caused the failure, or that your charges were grossly excessive compared to market rates. And the bad news? The bad news is that investigations like this can take months, cost you money in legal fees, and create stress even if you are ultimately cleared. Plus, if the investigator finds any violations, even minor ones, It goes on your permanent record. Patricia knows this. She is trying to bury me in bureaucracy. Probably. People file complaints out of spite all the time. Most do not go anywhere, but they serve their purpose by making the target's life difficult. I spent the next several weeks gathering documentation, service records, parts invoices, call logs, everything that could demonstrate my version of events. I also got statements from other clients testifying to my professionalism and fair pricing. The whole process was exhausting and expensive. Meanwhile, life in Sunset Ridge became increasingly uncomfortable. Patricia made a point of glaring at me whenever our paths crossed. She started filing petty HOA complaints about other aspects of my property. My trash cans were visible from the street 15 minutes past the allowed time. My lawn was a quarter-inch too long according to the standards. I had a garden hose that was not properly coiled. Each complaint was technically valid but absurdly petty. It was clear that Patricia had declared war. Emma was reaching her breaking point. "Logan, this is affecting our quality of life. Maybe we should just move. Find a house in a neighborhood without an HOA. We would take a loss selling right now. And why should we have to move? We are not the ones being unreasonable." "No, but you did deliberately let her heating system break. You started this escalation." "She started it by blocking my van. We were arguing more than we ever had in our marriage." The stress of Patricia's campaign was poisoning everything. I knew Emma was right on some level, that my choice to play games with the heating repair had been unethical and had opened the door for all this blowback. But I also felt trapped and angry and unwilling to let Patricia win. Things came to a head in early March. I came home from work one afternoon to find a certified letter taped to my front door. It was from a law firm representing Patricia Henderson, informing me that she was filing a civil lawsuit for damages related to my heating system repair work. She was seeking $10,000 for alleged negligence, emotional distress, and the cost of having to use space heaters while her system was not functioning properly. I sat in my driveway, in my van that I had fought so hard to park there, and felt the weight of everything crushing down on me. This had spiraled so far beyond the original parking dispute. I had wanted to teach Patricia a lesson about consequences, but I had not fully thought through the consequences for myself. I called Rachel Foster and explained the new lawsuit. She listened patiently and then said, "Logan, I am going to be straight with you. This woman has resources and motivation to drag you through the legal system for years. Even if you win every case, the time and money it takes to defend yourself will be substantial. Have you considered trying to settle this, after everything she has done? I know it feels like giving in, but sometimes the practical choice is not the emotionally satisfying one. You have a business to run and a marriage to protect. Is winning this war with Patricia really worth the cost?" I did not answer immediately because I did not know. That night, Emma and I had a long conversation about everything. She was not angry anymore, just tired and sad. "I love you," she said, holding my hand across the kitchen table. "But I need you to really think about what you are trying to accomplish here. You proved your point. You got to park your van in the driveway." Patricia was embarrassed in front of the board, but now it is consuming our lives. "Is that what you want?" I want her to stop coming after us. "Then maybe you need to be the bigger person and offer a truce. Because right now, you are both locked in this escalating cycle and nobody is winning." Over the next few days, I thought hard about what Emma had said. I also did some research into Patricia's background and discovered some interesting information. Before moving to Sunset Ridge 3 years ago, Patricia had been the HOA president of another community in Phoenix. She had been removed from that position after multiple complaints about overreach and harassment. There were even some online forums where former residents of that community discussed their negative experiences with her. Patricia had a pattern. This was not really about my van or HOA rules. This was about control and power, and I was just her latest target. Armed with this information, I made a decision. I reached out to Tom Jacobs and asked if he would be willing to facilitate a meeting between Patricia and myself with other board members present as witnesses. Tom agreed, though he sounded skeptical about the potential for resolution. The meeting was held at the clubhouse on a Saturday morning. Patricia arrived looking wary and defensive. I had prepared what I wanted to say, and I delivered it calmly. "Patricia, I am here to propose a truce. I will admit that I handled the repair situation unprofessionally. I should have been more transparent about the timeline and more responsive to your concerns as a client. I am willing to refund $500 from what you paid me as a gesture of goodwill." She looked surprised. "Why would you do that?" "Because this has gone too far. We are neighbors. We have to live in the same community. This constant fighting is bad for both of us and bad for everyone around us. You are only saying this because I filed a lawsuit. Maybe that is part of it. But I am also saying it because I have learned some things about you and your history with HOAs. You have a pattern of these conflicts, Patricia. Sunset Ridge is not the first community where you have been in constant battles with residents. At some point, you have to ask yourself if the problem is everyone else or if the problem is how you approach these situations." Her face reddened. "You have been investigating me. It is all public information. Online forums, court records. You left your last HOA position under a cloud. You are on track to do the same thing here unless you change your approach." Tom interjected gently. "Patricia, Logan is making a genuine offer to de-escalate. I think we should all consider taking it. This has been disruptive for the entire community." Patricia sat silently for a long moment. I could see emotions warring on her face. Pride, anger, maybe a touch of shame. "What exactly are you proposing?" she finally asked. "I refund you $500. You dropped the lawsuit and the licensing board complaint. We both agree to stop filing complaints against each other unless there is a serious, legitimate issue. We do not have to be friends, but we act like civil neighbors. And if I say no, then we keep fighting, keep spending money on lawyers, and keep making ourselves and everyone around us miserable. Your choice." Sandra Wu spoke up. "Patricia, I think you should accept. This has been hard on all of us on the board. We are all volunteers trying to maintain a nice community, not referee personal feuds." Patricia looked around the table at the other board members, all of whom were nodding in agreement. She finally let out a long breath. "Fine. I will drop the lawsuit and the complaint. But I expect that $500 refund in writing with a proper invoice adjustment. You will have it by Monday," I promised. We shook hands awkwardly, and that was it. The war was over. Not with a bang, but with a whimper and a compromise that satisfied nobody completely, but at least stopped the bleeding. Over the following weeks, true to her word, Patricia withdrew her lawsuit, and the licensing board complaint was dismissed. Life in Sunset Ridge gradually returned to normal. Patricia and I nodded stiffly when we saw each other, but did not interact beyond that. She seemed to dial back her HOA enforcement generally, possibly because the other board members had made clear they would not support her more extreme positions. My business recovered from the disruption. The van remained parked in my driveway without further incident. Emma and I started going on date nights again, instead of spending our evenings discussing legal strategies. About 2 months after our truce, I ran into Patricia at the grocery store. We were both in the produce section, and for a moment I thought about just avoiding her. But something made me walk over. "Hey, Patricia." She looked up, startled. "Logan, hello. How is your heating system running? No more problems." "It is fine. Working perfectly, actually." "Good. That is good." There was an awkward pause. Then Patricia said quietly, "I am sorry about how things escalated. I was out of line with some of my actions. I had not expected an apology." "I am sorry too. I should not have played games with your repair. That was unprofessional." "We both made mistakes." "Yeah, we did." Another pause, less awkward this time. "For what it is worth," Patricia continued, "I have been thinking about what you said, about my patterns. Maybe you were right. Maybe I have been too rigid about enforcement. Maybe I have been too quick to see everything as a personal attack. The van thing really blindsided me and I reacted badly." Patricia almost smiled. "It was a bit much, parking my car across your driveway. I can see that now. Water under the bridge, water under the bridge." We went our separate ways, and while Patricia and I never became friends, we did become the kind of neighbors who could coexist peacefully. She remained HOA president, but with a notably lighter touch. The subdivision stopped feeling like a police state and started feeling like a community again. I learned some valuable lessons from the whole experience. I learned that revenge might feel satisfying in the moment, but comes with costs you do not always anticipate. I learned that people can change, even difficult people, if given the chance and the right motivation. And I learned that sometimes the best victory is not crushing your enemy, but finding a way to live peacefully, despite your differences. My van still sits in my driveway every night, a symbol of the battle I fought and sort of won. But more importantly, when I look at it now, I do not feel anger or vindication. I just feel grateful that the whole mess is behind me and that I can focus on what actually matters: my work, my marriage, and my life. The HOA board elections happened that fall, and Patricia chose not to run for re-election. Tom Jacobs became the new president, and under his leadership, the board reviewed and clarified many of the vague rules that had caused so much conflict. The new guidelines were more reasonable and more clearly defined, making it harder for any future board member to weaponize them against residents they did not like. Patricia stayed in the neighborhood and stayed involved in community activities, but in a more positive way. She organized a neighborhood watch program that actually brought people together instead of just monitoring them for violations. She volunteered at community events. It was like becoming a regular board member instead of president had freed her from the need to be constantly in control. As for me, my business continued to grow. I hired a second technician, bought another van, and actually had to look into getting a small commercial space for storage and an office. The irony was not lost on me that the whole conflict had started over parking a commercial vehicle in a residential area. And now, I was successful enough to afford a proper business location. Emma and I celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary that December with a trip to San Diego, far away from HOA bylaws and neighborhood drama. Sitting on the beach watching the sunset, she turned to me and said, "You know what I am most proud of about how you handled everything with Patricia?" "What is that?" "That you found a way to end it instead of letting it consume you. A lot of people would have kept fighting just on principle. It took maturity to step back and make peace. I had a good wife who kept me grounded. You did. But you also made the choice yourself. That counts for something." Looking back now, the whole saga feels almost surreal. It started so simply with a parking dispute and spiraled into lawsuits and investigations and genuine animosity between neighbors. But it also taught me things about myself that I needed to learn. About when to fight and when to compromise. About the difference between justice and revenge. about how easy it is to let conflict define you if you are not careful. Patricia's heating system breaking down completely was a direct result of my choices I made out of anger and a desire to teach her a lesson. Was it satisfying at the time? Absolutely. Would I do it again knowing everything that followed? Probably not. The satisfaction was not worth the months of stress and conflict that resulted, but I also do not entirely regret standing up to Patricia's initial bullying about the van. Some fights are worth having. The key is knowing when to fight and when to find another path forward. And perhaps most importantly, knowing when you have won enough that continuing to fight becomes pointless. These days, when I drive through Sunset Ridge in my work van, I see a community that is mostly happy and peaceful. Kids play in the yards, neighbors chat on the sidewalks, and the HOA enforces rules with common sense and flexibility. It is what a homeowners association should be, a tool for maintaining community standards, not a weapon for personal vendettas. I still see Patricia around sometimes. We wave. Sometimes we even have brief, pleasant conversations about weather or community events. It is amazing how much lighter life feels when you are not carrying around anger and grudges. I fixed her air conditioning system last summer when it went out during a heat wave, and this time I did the job quickly and professionally with no games. She paid without complaint and even left a positive review for my business online. Life is too short to be at war with your neighbors over parking spaces and heating systems. I am glad I learned that lesson, even if I learned it the hard way. And I am grateful that Patricia seemed to learn something too. Maybe we both needed that conflict to grow into better versions of ourselves. My van is parked in my driveway right now as I write this, and I can see it from my home office window. It is just a vehicle, a tool for my work, nothing more and nothing less. But it also represents a chapter of my life that taught me important lessons about pride, revenge, forgiveness, and the importance of knowing when to stop fighting. The HOA rules still exist, of course. They always will. But they are applied fairly now, with human judgment and understanding. And that makes all the difference between a neighborhood that feels like a community and a neighborhood that feels like a battleground. I am grateful for the peace. I am grateful for the lessons. And I am grateful that when Patricia's heating system inevitably needs service again someday, I can help her without any lingering resentment or desire for revenge. That is growth. That is what being a good neighbor really means. The story of how an HOA Karen blocked my repair van and I let her heating system break down completely is not really a story about revenge. It is a story about conflict, escalation, and ultimately about finding a way back to peace. Both Patricia and I made mistakes. Both of us let pride and anger drive decisions that made things worse. But both of us also found our way to something better in the end. That is a better ending than either of us defeating the other completely. Real life is not about winners and losers. It is about people trying to coexist and sometimes failing and hopefully learning from those failures. Patricia and I both learned. Our neighborhood learned. And hopefully, anyone reading this might learn something too about the costs of unnecessary conflict and the value of eventual reconciliation.